started. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much to our National Collaborative for Health Equity, our staff and consultants. Thank you so much for all the planning and work that you put into this town hall. Thank you also to all of our attendees. I am Gail Christopher, Executive Director of the National Collaborative for Health Equity. And like everyone, we've been searching for ways to respond to this unique moment in our nation's history. We felt that this gathering of leaders and community activists and scholars would help us to create an authentic narrative in terms of the issues of crime and safety in our communities. We hope that you'll come out of this with an even greater sense of motivation and hope as to how we are really ensuring the safety of our communities, how we're really working toward well-being. At this moment, our national branches of government seem to have stepped into an abyss of chaos, cruelty, and constitution and law violation. And since our branches at the national level seem to be on the wrong track, we must turn to the fourth branch of government, which is not often honored, but is the heart of our democracy. We, the people, must stand up. And you'll see from our speakers today that the people are standing up and doing the work of bringing and ensuring safety in our communities. This has been the case throughout history, and it is certainly the case now. Our session today will consist of 3 panels of experts. We will talk about creating authentic narratives. We'll also focus in on the healing and the building of community that is required for progress in our democracy. We'll take a break, and then we'll focus on the transformations of systems that are necessary for sustained progress. You'll note, those of you that are familiar with it, that this organization of our panels reflects the Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Framework. It is an adaptation of the globally recognized Truth and Reconciliation process launched by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation almost a decade ago now, a truth process for our country, one that will lead to overcoming many of the divides that beset us now and also in the past. We're honored to have as our moderator a colleague and friend and leader of the national TRHT coalition effort, Dr. Marcus Hunter. He is a professor at UCLA, but most recently, he has joined us at our own Howard University here in Washington, D.C., as the chair of the Department of Sociology and Criminology. We're so fortunate to have him moderate our panel. I'm turning it over to you, Dr. Hunter.
Thank you so much to the Oracle, Dr. Christopher. We love you. You are so beloved. And more than a conversation, it is you who is needed in these times. Thank you for the vision that you've had and for channeling the information and wisdom of the Creator into truth, racial healing, and transformation, concept and framework for which I think more credit ought to be given to you than has been before. So let me at least participate in the chorus of recognition of your intellectual property and the product of your spiritual journey that brings us all together here today. Thank you so much, Dr. Christopher.
Thank you, Marcus.
You already know. Peace and prosperity and welcome, beautiful people. Today's town hall is a space where we confront the stories being told about our communities, uplift the work happening on the ground, and explore what true safety and equity require. Our journey flows through three movements or three energies, depending on how you flow: truth, healing, and transformation. We start with truth because it's undefeated. But also we start with truth because it's at the top of that framework that Dr. Christopher mentioned. The essential work of correcting narratives so communities can define themselves and not be defined by fear or distortion. So let's begin with our first conversation: truth, authentic narratives. This first panel brings together leaders who are reshaping how we understand crime, safety, immigration, and policing at a moment where misinformation and disinformation is being used as a political weapon. Joining us are Dr. Rashal M. Brackney, former Pittsburgh Bureau of Police commander, with over 30 years of service, former chief of police at George Washington University and in Charlottesville after the Unite the Right rally, and a now distinguished visiting professor of practice at George Mason University. Dr. Brackney is a nationally recognized expert in harm reduction, procedural justice, restorative practices, and dismantling institutions of supremacy. Her work focuses on building legitimate, transparent, and accountable policing systems. We'll also be joined in this panel by State Representative Lillian Jimenez, leading efforts to protect immigrant communities amid increased ICE activity and politicized rhetoric. Also, Delegate Melissa Wells, advancing youth safety and community-based crime reduction in Baltimore. State Representative and Delegate will be joining us as the panel commences, but also we will hear from Nadia Aziz, Attorney Nadia Aziz, a civil rights attorney tracking national crime trends, hate violence, and gun violence, and also just doing the Lord's work in the discipline of our law. So I want to start with Nadia. Nadia, crime is decreasing nationally even as hate violence rises. What should communities understand about these trends, and how do we communicate clearly that immigrants commit less crime than U.S.-born residents?
Thank you, Dr. Hunter, and thank you, Dr. Christopher, for having me. Excellent question. I wanted to note a couple things at the top to really kind of drive home how these narratives that are coming out of the White House and media outlets are false when you look at the data. And then I want to sort of talk about that hate violence that you mentioned has been increasing. So let's start with National Guard deployment. In the summer, over the summer, the president began discussing the possibility of deploying National Guard to cities that he said were out of control with crime. He threatened to deploy National Guard to major cities, including Baltimore and San Francisco. In June, he federalized a California National Guard, deployed them to LA in response to protests about immigration rates. And in August, President Trump deployed the National Guard to DC. He signed an executive order declaring a crime emergency, stating he was taking historic action to, quote, rescue the nation's capital from crime, bloodshed, bedlam, and squalor. He has called DC a nightmare of murder and crime. He said this about other cities as well, and I want to point to the data. I have all of this, cited as well that I've shared with the NCHE staff that we can send out if folks are interested. But the National Guard was deployed in DC during a time of declining violent crime. Reports have shown that 2024 violent crime was at its lowest level in 30 years. From 23 to 24, violent crime was down by 35% in DC. And when you look at early 2025 data, regional data shows that the DMV area, DC, Maryland, Virginia area, crime was down by 13%. So the narrative and the data are not adding up. It's not a new narrative. This is a narrative that sort of echoes racist stereotypes that we've heard for decades and centuries that are used to, reinforce a racial hierarchy. And one of the things that's interesting is a narrative you don't hear about is the impact that these, spewing these false narratives have on communities. And so hate crimes, hate violence has been on the rise. This is a crime that has actually been increasing that you don't hear, the administration talking about. But I want to connect the two. So when there is an increase in divisive, inflammatory, racist rhetoric in sort of the public sphere, when tensions are high in public dialogue, you also see an increase in reported hate crimes. And so these narratives that are coming out of the White House, that are coming out of some media outlets and commentators, they're not just false, they're incredibly harmful. And so would love to jump more into specifics about hate crime data if you would like. But since 2015 to 2023, I haven't done the most recent calculation, but hate crimes have increased by over 80%. And this is just the ones we know about. A plurality of hate crimes target African Americans and Black Americans. A majority of hate crimes target people because of their race and ethnicity. It's a huge problem, and these narratives that are false really are incredibly harmful to our public safety.
Thank you so much, Attorney Aziz. And I want to keep this idea of narrative going, but also enforcement that I hear in what Attorney Aziz shared. So I want to come to you, Dr. Brackney. You have led police departments through some of the most challenging moments in recent American history, including Charlottesville after the Unite the Right. Based on your expertise in harm reduction and procedural justice, what practices are most effective today in reducing violence while increasing police legitimacy and community trust?
So thank you. Thank you for having me. And I'm actually grateful that I followed Attorney Aziz for this reason, because, data has been weaponized against communities who are not marginalized, but who have been marginalized. Black and brown communities are not marginalized people. We are exceptional people. The problem is the narratives that we spin around data. And we've weaponized narratives much more effectively than we've weaponized data. So what I would ask, and what I tell people is, how do you reduce harm in communities is through this truth-telling component. Because whoever controls the narrative controls the resources, controls the policies, controls the deployment of it. And so one of the most effective ways that I was able to change the narrative in Charlottesville and in places like Pittsburgh, where we have a lot of communities, where I grew up in one of the poorest, most violent communities in the city of Pittsburgh, it was often the narrative. But here's what I also want to tell us when we think about effective ways to reach our communities is this. The most effective ways is to turn over police power. I know this does not sound like something, you should see the death threats I get when I say this, and I really do get death threats over these things. The power belongs to the people to authentically identify what does safety feel like in their spaces and what does harm feel like. But if we're actually talking data and crime reduction and things of that nature, the things that I have found most effective is the community identifies those issues that are causing them harm. And then we provide the wraparound and support services and fill in the gaps for when they don't have assets in their own community to address the issue. As long as we control the policies, as long as we control the narratives, and when I say we, that's a big W, not little Dr. Brackney here, we. As long as we can control that and they can control the big ticket items, you are going to continue to see the weaponization of resources against our communities. And to Attorney Aziz's point is this, I would say this. This is something that the administration right now is slowly anesthetizing us to. And what do I mean by that? This started, if you remember, Operation Lone Star in Texas, when they literally were deploying National Guard under Governor Abbott, and they sent 100 National Guards persons to Texas to help support that initiative. And the other thing to help support crime is know the rules and regulations. What are the things that I'm allowed to do? Technically, when you think of Customs and Border Patrol and National Guards, Customs and Border can only operate within 100 miles of the ports and borders, but people don't know that. So you shouldn't have Custom and Border in the middle of like Virginia or Central Virginia, but we don't know about those things. So the best thing to do to reduce crime is determine who defines it, who owns it, and then how do we all wrap around to support the communities to see that to fruition.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bragg. There's so much in what you said, including educating us all about the location of where these border control areas should be. I just learned. I was today years old when I learned that fun fact. And in this idea of also Texas being a proof of concept effectively for what we're seeing now. And I think that's a really good way to segue into another proof of concept. We are fortunate to have Delegate Wells here, where Baltimore, and I'm from Philly, so I learn from people of Baltimore who say Baltimore. Okay, Baltimore is making significant progress. What community government collaborations are making the biggest impact on safety and opportunity for vulnerable youth from your vantage point?
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with this amazing panel. And Ari was taking some notes, and I think you, Dr. Brackney, I like the quote you mentioned around the weaponization of narratives, but not the effective use of data, because I think that is something that we've seen here in Maryland. We had some, some state policy around juvenile justice and, the idea of who's committing crime, and oftentimes the incorrect use of data around that it's a lot of teenagers committing crime. And so I think that that's one of the big things here in Baltimore, as well as, how the state is contributing to the model, is really looking at the data itself. I think also having those conversations in the communities around like what are the challenges. We've seen historic declines in crime in Baltimore over the last decade, and that is not by accident. That is in collaboration with the mayor, our city police department, as well as with our communities and the state. I think one of the biggest things that has been really helping is for us to be able to identify hot spots. So we have, especially in my district, we have a lot of vacants in blight, and how the vacancy and blight, us being able to start to address those issues specifically around abandoned homes and how that can be hot spots for illegal activity. But also it's rebuilding communities that have been disinvested in, right? We know that crime and a lot of the public safety challenges does not operate in a vacuum by itself. There's a lot of other undercutting that takes place in our communities. You think about our education for our young people, resources for our young people, whether it's mentorship, but also just resources in the community with community centers and other programmatic efforts. We also know our liquor stores. A lot of times there's crime that the data proves that there's a lot of crime, gun violence that happens in proximity to our liquor stores. And so we've worked with, at the state level, worked with our residents and our communities to hold those bad actors accountable and to put in place some limitations to their hours of operation. I think some of the other aspects that has been really helpful as well is looking at, so talk about the hotspot strategy, but group violence reduction. So really applying precision. So, our police department is still under a consent decree because of the well-known unconstitutional policing that's taking place. So we're not looking at applying some of these things far and wide, really looking at where are the hotspot areas where we know that highly targeted. So we're not doing broad sweeps or unfocused enforcement, and making sure that we're offering life-changing resources to individuals. I think the community violence piece, the community violence intervention is also very, very key as well. I can go on and on. I'm sure there'll be more opportunity for me to weigh in, but I wanted to give you a little bit of a appetite, whet your appetite a little bit to what we have been doing. And the state has been pivotal in providing resources and support to the city.
Thank you so much, Delegate Wells. I mean, it's also just a beautiful thing to see a Black woman in a position of yours. And I mean, just to see women of color in the positions that each of you are in, it brings my heart much joy. We're also fortunate to have Representative Jimenez here as well. And so we're going to go from Baltimore to Chicago, where I was fortunate to have lived. And I know Dr. Christopher lived in Chicago as well. And so we come to this as a forever residence, and also with the curiosity of what does the data actually show about crime in Chicago today? And how are immigrant communities contributing to the safety of the city rather than detracting from it?
I think she just got logged off because she was having technical difficulties. So
Okay,
hopefully
we'll
she
keep
comes right
rolling.
back in.
Yeah, we'll keep rolling and we'll await.
She's back.
Oh, here we go. So I'll restate it for Representative Jimenez. Representative Jimenez, we're asking, what does the data actually show about crime in Chicago today? And how are immigrant communities contributing to the city's safety rather than detracting from it?
Thank you. Actually, we just had a new report out of the city of Chicago, which was really interesting, that showed that, and many of you have known that we've been doing a lot of community interventions, as were mentioned previous to me, a lot of youth, a lot of investment in the city of Chicago, and the state of Illinois in youth jobs and youth programs. And so this recent report from the city said that the mayor credits the police department and the community safety investments in community violence intervention, youth summer employment violence prevention programs with a historic reduction in crime. Chicago's record reductions in 2025 builds upon the progress the city has made. And now in the new numbers cited by DHS in their press release, we are seeing that citywide, while homicides are down 31.5% and shootings are down 40.5%, and on every single metric, we've seen a reduction. However, in the 9th and 10th police districts where ICE and CBP have been most active, the reductions are actually lower. And we could guess why, but actually it's in the report. There are less 911 calls. People are afraid to contact any community organization, afraid to contact the police. And so we've seen that these historic reductions that we've seen over the last year and over the last few months there's been interruption in that historic reduction in the communities where ICE and CBP have been present. So it's really, the fact that that data just dropped only really just confirmed what we've seen in our communities. My community in particular, where I'm a state representative, is the heart of the Puerto Rican community. We also have a huge population from Mexico, Ecuador, Honduras, Guatemala. It's just a huge, diverse community. And we were one of the locations where there's a lot of new arrivals from the southern border, which was mentioned before, that the Texas governor bused people to Chicago, Illinois, and to our community in particular. So we did not see an increase in crime. We actually saw reductions across the board in the city of Chicago in the same time period. And so we know that in Chicago, but obviously the national stage, the narrative is completely the opposite of that. The administration is trying to push a narrative that we've seen, criminalizing immigrants when the facts are just completely the opposite. And so here in Chicago, I wanted to share that we have, at least in our community, we've seen what we have invested in and what we will continue to invest in is these youth development programs. We have 3 organizations on the ground I wanted to share with you, just in terms of like sharing real stories and narratives about things that are working and things that we want to see more investment in. There is an organization called The Block that has youth intervention, and they do it through boxing and teaching young people how to have confidence in themselves and their physicality, and also in their mental acuity. And so this program, for example, is in a community that is a Black and Brown community. Young people here are very disinvested, historically disinvested community, where you see just historically high rates of homicides, high rates of shootings and robberies and hijackings, and all of that has seen a reduction. and at the same time that we've been investing in this program. It's a boxing youth program, right? Not many folks think that a boxing youth program will necessarily be the way to reduce violence. But it is also it's a holistic program where they provide food to families. They have boxes of food when kids come in that kids can take back to their homes, where parents can come in and pick up food. They have tutoring, homework help, where the kids actually, the young people, I should say, as part of their training, also take part in making sure that their academics, that they're making sure that they are investing in their academics, in their mind, in their body. And so out of that program, we've seen just wonderful over the average GPA rising. We've seen when there is the involvement, the justice involved youth, there's actually 0% of the youth, however, who are justice involved have had any further involvement with the justice system, right? So it's like 100% rate of success. We've seen 100% rate graduation rate for those young people. And so we've seen all of how and this is a population, as I mentioned, that is one of the most disinvested in the west side of Chicago. Folks know what the west side is of Chicago. Another program that we have is Build. Build also, it works with young people, but they have different types of programs. Instead of boxing, they have a lot of arts involvement. Whether it's they have a studio or an actual working recording studio where young people can go in and produce music and learn that type of music. And in the same space, it's I think a 4-floor building. It's a youth center where the state of Illinois has invested millions of dollars to build a brand new infrastructure in the heart of the West Side, which has historically been disinvested. That's where white flight happened. That's where the building knockdowns happened. Over when I was young person, all we saw were buildings being knocked down and nothing being constructed. And so now we have gone to that space where there's so many empty lots and built an entire youth center, a 4-floor youth center. And as I said, there's a recording studio, but there's also therapist rooms, mental health spaces. There's multiple, I think there's 4 or 5. So young people can go there without the pressure of necessarily making an appointment. But when they're there, they know that the doors are open to them. Those therapists are there as the hours at the youth center is open on the top floor, but there's also privacy spaces so people can go in on their own, make their own appointment. They don't have to go through their parents. They don't have to go through their school, through insurance. It's available to them in a space that welcomes them. And so each floor has different activities, has access again to food, because we holistic, we know that that holistic model really works for young people. Having like a one-stop shop for them, where they can go in and get the homework help. There's a maker's lab, there's a recording studio, there's a therapy rooms, there is spaces where people can just be themselves and be calm, like these calming rooms where they can just sit by themselves. And we know that young people sometimes in their homes don't have those spaces, because we also have the statistics that show that, you know, we have dilapidated housing still. We have folks that are doubled up. We have families that are experiencing homelessness. And so to be able to have young people go into the space that is for them, that wraps them around with services and with love and with, they can self-select what type of services they want, has been really amazing. And so we have, again, in that same data, so this is Austin, Humboldt Park, and West Garfield in the heart of West Side of Chicago. We've seen the 60% improved or maintained their 3.0 or higher GPA. We've seen that 97% are on track for graduation, that they are trained in restorative justice with peace circles. And so again, this is what we've done in the last few years to get us to where we are with those 30%, 40% reductions in crime across Chicago, and specifically in the West Side. As I said, again, the citywide homicides are down by 31% and shootings are down by 40%. And, you know, as a young person who grew up in Chicago in the 90s at the height of, unfortunately, the highest rates of homicides and shootings that ever existed across the country, but in Chicago as well. To see these kinds of reductions is a transformation that you can't even imagine. And I am just so proud to be part of a state that has invested and has seen these results. Another organization, I might have gone over time. So
Oh yeah, I was gonna say if we can pause there because I want to make sure we get to the Q&A, but also to say one, thank you for your work too. Your point about transformation is well taken and built into today's town hall as that will close us out. So that was, I think, especially the right energy. I want to call forward Ms. Christina Johnson, who will help us navigate the Q&A as she comes forward to help navigate the questions that are coming up in the chat. I do want to have each of you marinate on a question. It'll be simple, but I want to reframe the word story just to give some words to break that word down. Most people may not know, but sometimes the etymology of a lot of our words are actually other words. For example, news is north, east, west, south, but we say news. So story, I want to offer, what if it's speak, testify, open, restore, yield, story. We've heard all of these stories from each of you, and I'm curious, as we go through this panel and then we open a Q&A, and a kind of rapid fire, and I'll start with Dr. Brackney, go to Attorney Aziz, Delegate Wells, and then to Representative Jimenez, is what is a truth that exists from your vantage point that is being powerfully distorted? What is the story that's there that is true, but is being distorted?
So I love this because as a professor, how do we interrogate narratives, right? How do we interrogate truths is really important. And I think one of the things that is being distorted is actually the word truth itself, right? And why is that important, right? The truth requires something. It does require us to interrogate those narratives, but it also requires us to dismantle them when we think about crime and communities, and even about one another. So, truth. Crime is real in America, and it is causing trauma. We understand that. Truth. Families are grieving. Truth. Businesses are suffering. Truth. Communities are fighting every day just for a sense of stability, right? And safety. But there's the narrative around perceived crime. Mm-hmm. That's the problem. It's being fueled by like these viral videos, these 30-second takes or sound bites on the news. It's the selective reporting. It's the political agendas. It's the national rhetoric, if we want to talk about that in terms of what it means. And it makes people believe they're living in a war zone when their local realities are telling them a different story. And so when we talk about truth, we must confront truth and understand that fear travels faster than facts, perception lasts longer than data, fear is weaponized, public trust collapses, let's talk about it. And then if we don't authentically tell the truth, the others will tell it for us inaccurately. So that's what I think about when I think about truth and stories.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brackney. I mean, your class must be on fire. You don't even have to
It's
tell.
called Policing Black Bodies, right? I just hit them in the face with it.
Yeah, that's right.
And
you're doing your big
in a
one.
racialized
Yes.
state. Come right out with policing in a racialized state. Send your students to me.
Yes.
Bring the babies to me.
Yes, thank you. And also, I'd be remiss if I didn't just thank you for being a geographical cousin of mine from Philly. You are from the land that produced August Wilson. We will always love Pittsburgh. Thank you so much for everything you're doing. I'll pass it to Attorney Aziz.
And can you state the question again?
Yeah, no problem. What is a story that is true for you or is true? And you also see it being distorted at the same time, where people are not getting the truth of this story.
I would say that something that is being distorted, the people of color are not victims of hate crimes in particular, specifically Black Americans. It's discussed a lot. I mentioned earlier, Black Americans are you're most likely to be a victim of a hate crime if you are a Black American. but yet that's really not discussed that much in a lot of spaces. And also, if someone is the victim of a hate crime, um, there are barriers and challenges to getting resources.
Thank you so much. I will go to Delegate Wells.
Thank you. I mean, I would say that what is crime is real in Baltimore. Crimes are committed every day in Baltimore City, but I think it's this theory that nothing is getting better. That our young people are lawless, that that there's no hope for them at all. And I think that I know that that's not true because I know that we have our young people are helping drive the work that we do, especially when it comes to community violence intervention through Safe Streets, which is a peer to peer model of working with individuals from the community. Some of them have had run-ins with the law in the past, but they've turned their lives around. And so we have this model that's rooted and driven by individuals who were on a less than optimal path, but they're a part of they're really important in terms of conflict mediation. They're helping reduce conflict and helping de-escalate situations. They're providing trauma support to helping residents navigate violence, be they especially on the folks that are on the receiving end of violence. And so I think that they are a constant presence in our neighborhoods. And it really just goes to show one of many different types of initiatives that we have in Baltimore, that our community really does care about our community, and that we are really the architects of this change. And unfortunately, they're not the ones that our outlet here, our Fox News outlet, Fox 45, they're not the ones that you see speaking about what's happening in the community. And a lot of times people who don't even live in Baltimore City are the ones. And I think the piece around virality, that because when these instances happen, say it's a notable incident, or it's something that just gets shared and it's on a loop, and that becomes, it's almost as if every time that plays, it's a new incident, even though it's the same incident that they're all looking at. So I think that is a huge aspect, and why that really does matter is because we often have to fight really hard for resources for Baltimore City, especially our children's education. And so it's important to push back on these narratives because our children were shortchanged in the first place. There was a lawsuit here, and where it was known that the state was underfunding schools in Baltimore City. So we are still, recovering from that. We've made historic investments in our education for our students, but unfortunately, a lot of individuals got lost along the way.
Thank you so much, Representative Jimenez. What is a powerful story for you that is a truth that may be being distorted right now?
Yeah, I think for us, keeping with the theme of young people, it is true that there is a lot of tension between newcomer young people and our communities, and the Black community specifically, but also just folks that do not have an immigrant background of different races and ethnicities. And so that tension, it is true that it exists, and we are constantly seeing that very real tension. But it is being distorted in order, to, unfortunately, to the benefit of folks that are not in our communities, right? And so the truth of the matter is, we are in community together, living next door to each other, at least in the west side of Chicago, where our high schools and our elementary schools are, 40-60% Latino and Black, or the opposite. And so there's so much opportunity there to have those conversations, to have those peace circles, to break down where those very real tensions come from. And again, I say newcomers and folks that are not as have been here for generations, because we also have the same tension among second and third generation Latinos and newcomers, and sometimes it's wrapped up also with or impacted by the fact that there's different countries that people are coming from. Someone from Honduras is not the same as someone from Puerto Rico, our family from Puerto Rico who has been U.S. citizens for generations, and someone from Honduras who has a completely different background and culture, but united by language, right? And so a lot of those tensions do exist, but when we allow young people, and what I've seen, some of the truth that is positive is that I've seen when you bring young people together, they do amazing things. They understand solidarity really deeply. I was able to go to a high school and see a play that was put together by young people about the impact of immigration rates in their community. And it was a multiracial, multilingual play that was put together by young people. And it was really beautiful and wonderful. It will stay with me forever. But the truth is the tensions exist, but the truth is also that people can see each other and build with each other if provided with, the right tools. And when that unfortunate hatred and that misunderstanding is set aside, that beautiful relationships can be fostered.
Thank you so much. And we have some wonderful questions in the chat. I'm going to ask the panelists, if you can, to try to respond inside because we're at our time. But I think they're wonderful questions. The first one is from Masozi Narenda out of Washington State, who has been one of the key folks, advocates around the national TRHT movement, asking, with the chaos, madness, and nonsense dominating our political climate today, how do you keep going and maintain joy? I just think that's the joy question, which we should always be asking ourselves. But do feel free to respond in the chat. What are ways that you can recommend that we resist gross disinformation and violence locally and nationwide? And what would you say around the calls of action that we can do to help the nation ground more in truth and safety? And again, these are in the chat. Last one is, how are we formally sharing successful strategies to leverage what works with allies? I think this is the best practice question. What are they? Are we sharing them? How can we find them? Please, everyone, if you won't mind, emojiing your way, reacting your way, or even showing yourself some, so we can show appreciation for our wonderful panelists for being with us in this first very awesome panel on truth. Thank you all for your work. Thank you for what you represent both in your embodied experience and also what you represent for those who are a part of an experience where we need your advocacy and we need your representation. Thank you so very much.